Now that we have the ability to edit a restaurant, let's add a feature that will allow a user to create a new restaurant. What I'd like to add is a button here to the list of restaurants at the bottom that will allow the user to create a new restaurant from scratch. Now, in many projects, the create scenario and the edit scenario will be two different Razor pages. There's edit and then there's create. But what you'll find typically is a lot of your markup and some of your logic even is duplicated between edit and create. They're trying to do the same job just from a different starting point. What I'd like to show you is how you can use this edit page to both create a new restaurant as well as edit an existing restaurant, and we'll do it all from the edit page. We will start, however, in the list page where I want to add a button for the user to click on. So let's create an anchor tag using the ASP-page directive to point to the edit page. I will use the text add new, and let's add some Bootstrap styling. We can make this a button using the primary color. I'm going to save that file and come out to the browser and refresh already, because I just want to show you that this button does appear and I can click on this button, but I stay on the list. Why is that? Because the edit page demands and requires a restaurant ID. That's useful when I'm editing an existing restaurant, but when we're creating a new restaurant, I don't have a restaurant ID that I can pass along. So this is a scenario where I could make restaurant ID an optional parameter, and I can do that by placing a question mark here at the end. So now ASP.NET Core knows that I can reach the edit page by going to /restaurants/edit/3, which is a restaurant ID, or /restaurants/edit with no additional parameter. And then in order for this to work, I'm going to need to make some changes in my page model. So currently, I assume I always receive a restaurant ID, and I'm going to go out and look up a restaurant by that ID. Now I'm going to make this nullable, in which case restaurant ID might be null. So I only want to look up the restaurant if restaurant ID has a value. Only then will I go to the database and say, please get this restaurant by ID, and now I have to look at the value property to pull the actual integer value out. Otherwise, what should I do? Well, I don't need to look up the restaurant from the data source, so perhaps I could just initialize a new empty restaurant, or even provide some defaults here for the user. For example, if I knew the user's location based on their profile, I could go ahead and specify a default value here for the location. Since that value will populate the form input for location, it might save the user some time. They won't have to type it in. But in our application, since I really don't know anything about the user, I'm going to leave that out. So now I should be able to reach the edit page without passing an ID, in which case we'll be editing a new empty restaurant. Let's try this out. I have saved all my files. I'm going to refresh the browser. Now I want to add a new restaurant, and I am editing a restaurant with no name as yet. Now, before this can work and we click Save, we're going to need to update some of our on-post logic and our data source so that we can create and add new restaurants.